It was Christmas Eve, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Streetlights flickered softly over roads slick with a delicate sheen of ice, reflecting the muted glow of neon signs and the twinkling ornaments strung across shop windows. Snow fell in a steady, almost hypnotic drizzle, dusting the rooftops, the parked cars, and the edges of the streets in a soft white blanket. Pedestrians hurried past, coats pulled tightly, scarves wound high, breath visible in clouds that dissipated quickly into the cold night. Some carried shopping bags with hastily wrapped gifts, their footsteps echoing against the brick and stone of a city that was at once bustling and quiet in this moment. Lena tugged her coat tighter around herself, a thin navy jacket with fraying edges and a missing button near the collar. She clutched her son Noah, 4 years old, against her chest. He was sleeping, exhausted from a day of running a low fever, his small body pressed warmly into hers. His blonde hair was damp from the light snow that had dusted their walk from home to the city. Lena's boots crunched against the icy pavement as she made her way toward the bistro, a cozy spot tucked between towering office buildings. She could see the golden glow spilling out from the windows, a stark contrast to the steel gray of the winter evening. Tonight, Lena had taken a risk, a leap she wasn't sure she could justify. A friend had insisted she attend this blind date event, passing along a flyer with words like, "One night, one chance, a stranger to meet." The thought had made Lena laugh when she first saw it. A blind date on Christmas Eve? With a child to care for, shifts at work piling up, bills that never seemed to stop arriving, and exhaustion that pressed down like a physical weight? It seemed absurd. Yet, here she was, navigating the icy streets with her son in her arms, telling herself that maybe, just maybe, the night could bring something she had stopped believing in. Connection. Inside, Elliot Hawthorne waited. To the staff and casual diners, he looked like any other man in a dark coat, sipping hot chocolate in a corner booth. But poor Aru, a global investment firm known for its secrecy and sharp edge. He had mastered invisibility in public spaces, wearing plain suits, minimal jewelry, and an expression that rarely betrayed emotion. Tonight, however, there was a difference. Tonight, he was waiting for someone. The clock had already passed their agreed meeting time by nearly 40 minutes. The candle flickered in the center of his table, casting soft, dancing shadows across his hands and the untouched cup of hot chocolate. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, laughter, and the clinking of cutlery. Couples leaned in close across tables, exchanging small jokes or whispered confidences. Servers moved carefully between tables, balancing trays and refilling glasses. Elliot remained still, observing without participating, a calm presence in the storm of warmth and life around him. Every few minutes, his gaze flicked to the door. The snow outside blurred and shimmered, making the city beyond the glass look almost otherworldly. He did not check his phone. He did not fidget. Instead, he simply waited. Patience was not foreign to him, but tonight it felt different. There was a tension beneath the calm, an anticipation he did not usually allow himself to feel. This was not business. This was not a boardroom with sharp decisions and predictable outcomes. This was unknown, fragile, human. The waiters whispered among themselves. One asked, nodding discreetly toward Elliot. "Looks like it," another replied. A hostess peeked around the podium, brows furrowed. The restaurant had been expecting 2 guests for the holiday blind date, but only one had arrived. The staff exchanged glances, some doubtful, others sympathetic. Yet Elliot did not appear frustrated, not even slightly. His eyes held a quiet certainty, as though he believed that if he simply waited, the evening might still turn out differently. Meanwhile, outside, Lena adjusted her scarf and checked her watch. She had taken longer than expected, juggling Noah's needs, a sudden chill in the air, and a lingering fear that she was too late. She wondered if the restaurant would still welcome her, if the mysterious stranger would have left, if this whole endeavor was a foolish fantasy. Yet she could not shake a tiny spark of hope, hope that somehow, amidst the chaos of her life, tonight could be a moment of possibility. When Lena finally pushed open the door, the warmth hit her immediately. The scent of roasted coffee beans, sweet pastries, and the faint trace of cinnamon and vanilla enveloped her, pushing back the chill of the winter night. The golden glow of the interior bathed every surface, from the polished wooden tables to the softly glowing string lights hanging above. Conversations continued around her, but Lena's eyes were immediately drawn to the corner booth where a lone man sat, gray eyes fixed on the window, hands folded neatly, untouched cup before him. Elliot looked up as she entered. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, but there was something in his gaze that held recognition, patience, and, unexpectedly, a faint warmth. He stood just slightly, a subtle acknowledgement, not surprise, not impatience. He did not rush toward her, did not check his watch, did not scowl or frown. He simply waited, as he had been waiting for the past 40 minutes. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She adjusted Noah in her arms, brushing damp hair from his forehead, and stepped tentatively toward the table. The fear that she had failed, that she had been too late, that this was all a mistake, rose again, but she pushed it down, replacing it with a fragile determination. I'm so sorry, she said, voice low, almost swallowed by the soft jazz playing in the background. He had a fever today. I wasn't sure I could leave him. I didn't even know if I should come. Elliot's hand motioned gently toward the empty chair. Please, sit, he said calmly, his voice steady, warm, and devoid of judgment. The words hung in the air, carrying a weight that Lena had not expected, simple, unassuming, but profoundly kind. She lowered herself into the chair, careful with Noah in her arms, feeling an unusual rush of relief and vulnerability. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt seen. Not for the work she did, the struggles she faced, or the chaos of her life, but for showing up, despite fear and exhaustion. Elliot reached into his coat pocket, producing a small stuffed bear. He handed it to her gently. I thought someone might need this tonight, he said. Noah stirred, tiny hands reaching toward the bear, eyes blinking open in sleepy curiosity. Lena took it without words, caught off guard by the quiet thoughtfulness of this gesture. It was not a grand display of wealth or status. It was simple, human, kind. She tucked the bear into Noah's arms, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. The restaurant moved around them in a blur of holiday cheer, but in that small corner, a bubble of calm and intimacy formed. Lena and Elliot's eyes met briefly, sharing unspoken acknowledgement. Tonight was about presence, not pretense, connection, not impressiveness, honesty, not performance. Minutes stretched into hours as they navigated small talk, shared smiles, and fleeting glances at Noah. Each word, each gesture, was carefully considered, yet natural and effortless. And all the while, the snow fell outside, painting the city in quiet white, turning the night into something magical, fragile, and unforgettable. The soft clink of cutlery and the low hum of conversation filled the warmly lit bistro. Lena adjusted the blanket around Noah, her eyes flicking nervously toward Elliot. The room seemed larger now, or perhaps it was just that the warmth of the space contrasted with the tension coiling in her chest. Every snowflake that drifted past the window reminded her of the fragile balance she had maintained all day. Her son's fever, the icy streets, the late arrival. She had walked a tightrope, and now, here she was, standing in the soft glow of candlelight, facing a man she barely knew, but who had somehow made waiting feel like reassurance rather than judgment. Elliot's eyes met hers, gray, steady, observing without intrusion. They carried a subtle weight of understanding. He was not just looking at her, he was seeing her. It was not a look she was used to receiving. Most people glanced at her and saw exhaustion, perhaps a hint of desperation. Some pitied, some judged, but not him. He looked at her as though he recognized the unspoken layers beneath her exterior. The sleepless nights, the careful navigation of responsibilities, the quiet resilience. I wasn't sure I should come, Lena whispered again, brushing damp hair from her face. Her cheeks flushed, partly from the cold outside, partly from the vulnerability that clung to her words. Elliot offered a faint, reassuring smile, one that did not diminish her struggles, but acknowledged them. You came. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket, the tiny wear now cradled between Noah's arms and hers. There was something in his tone, a patience, a quiet certainty that made her chest ache with relief. No hurried gestures, no forced charm, just presence. The waiter arrived, quietly placing menus before them, though neither immediately looked. Elliot finally spoke again, his voice low but steady. "Shall we start with something warm?" Lena nodded, grateful, feeling a tension she hadn't realized she parried release just a little. "That sounds perfect," she said softly, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax, just slightly. As the waiter moved away, Elliot leaned back, observing her in that calm, unobtrusive way. Lena noticed how his hands rested on the table, relaxed yet purposeful. His coat draped neatly over the chair, snowflakes clinging faintly to the sleeve. She felt an inexplicable curiosity about him. Who was this man who could remain so composed, so attentive, without overwhelming or demanding? "I didn't dress for a date," Lena admitted, glancing down at her worn jeans and boots. Elliot tilted his head, eyes softening. "Neither did I," he said simply. There was no self-consciousness, no attempt to impress. It was an honesty she wasn't accustomed to encountering. It disarmed her, and she found herself laughing, a small, genuine sound that felt almost foreign to her own ears. Noah stirred, his tiny fingers curling around the stuffed bear, and she smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Noah?" Elliot asked, nodding toward the boy. His voice carried no judgment, only interest, soft and steady. "No," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It's been a rough day." She exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the day seep out just enough to be noticed, even by someone who barely knew her. Elliot reached into his coat pocket again, producing a neatly folded tissue. "I thought this might help," he said, offering it with a gentleness that caught her off guard. It was such a simple gesture, yet it carried a weight of consideration that was almost foreign. She took it, blinking, her lips parting as she searched for words. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, eyes unwavering. They ate in relative silence for a few moments, the ambient sounds of the restaurant fading into the background of their shared bubble. Lena stole glances at him, noticing the slight furrow in his brow as he focused on her. The way his eyes seemed to listen even when she wasn't speaking. She felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest, a blend of relief, curiosity, and cautious hope. "It's," she asked, finally. "No," he said, almost immediately. "I came with an expectation." His words were measured, thoughtful. He didn't rush, didn't attempt charm. They carried a quiet integrity that made her heartbeat quicken in a way she hadn't felt in years. Lena's thoughts drifted, as if her mind had been holding its breath all day. Here was a man who had waited for her. Not impatiently, not resentfully, but with a quiet confidence that she would arrive. It was a faith she had almost forgotten existed in the world. And yet he had waited. Noah stirred again, tiny coughs and a sleepy shift in his weight breaking her reverie. Lena adjusted him, tucking the blanket more securely around his legs. "He's usually more active this time of day," she murmured, watching as Elliot's eyes softened at the sight of her son. "You care for him well," he observed, quietly, with no judgment, no forced flattery, just acknowledgement. The words hit Lena in a way that made her chest tighten. No one had ever said that to her without ulterior motive. No one had ever noticed without judgment. And yet here was someone who clearly moved in worlds she had no access to, who had seen her effort and recognized it, quietly and sincerely. The meal continued with small, deliberate conversation. Elliot asked about her day, her work, her passions, but never in a prying way. Each question was gentle, attentive, designed to invite, not interrogate. Lena found herself relaxing further, sharing pieces of herself she had long held close. The little joys, the quiet victories, the moments of exhaustion, and the small wonders she found in raising Noah alone. Each revelation was met with interest, small nods, and the occasional soft laugh that made her feel safe rather than exposed. At one point, Elliot leaned forward slightly, eyes meeting hers with a subtle intensity. "You've carried so much on your own," he said softly, "and yet you still show up." Lena blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. Instead, she felt a tear prick at the corner of her eye, a sudden wave of recognition for the struggle, the resilience, and the quiet strength she had cultivated over the years. He had seen it, noticed it, and acknowledged it without pity. The candle flickered between them, casting gentle shadows across their faces. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in quiet, frozen beauty. Inside, the world seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the warmth of shared space, soft conversation, and a tentative but growing trust. Time slipped by unnoticed. The staff occasionally glanced at their table, noting the unusual intimacy. But Elliot and Lena remained cocooned in their quiet bubble. Each gesture, each glance, each word built a bridge of understanding. They did not need extravagant displays or elaborate conversation. Their connection thrived in the honesty of presence, and the recognition of effort, and the shared acknowledgement of life's struggles. Noah stirred once more, his small hand reaching for Lena's face. She smiled down at him, and Elliot's eyes followed the motion, soft and unassuming. "He has a sharp eye for kindness," Elliot said gently, a small smile tugging at his lips. Lena laughed quietly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "It's the little things," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. For the first time that day, Lena felt something she hadn't in months: hope. Not the naive, fragile hope of a dream that might never arrive, but a tangible, living hope. It existed in the small gestures, in the quiet patience, in the unspoken understanding between two people who had, against all odds, found a moment of connection on a night full of chaos. As they finished their meal, Elliot offered to help with the dishes, a subtle gesture, small but significant. Lena refused, shaking her head. "No, that's not necessary," she said, though her heart fluttered at the thought of someone offering to ease her burden without expectation. Elliot smiled faintly, eyes steady. "Then I'll simply remember this night," he said softly. And in that quiet, soft-spoken way, Lena realized something profound. She had expected to be judged, to be dismissed, or worse, stood up. Yet here she was, holding her son, sitting across from a man who had waited, who had seen her, and who had offered nothing but presence and respect. Outside, the snow continued its slow descent. Inside, the bistro hummed with life, but Lena and Elliot's corner remained suspended in a quiet bubble of anticipation, understanding, and the subtle beginnings of something neither could yet name, but both felt with clarity. For Lena, it was a revelation. For Elliot, it was a quiet confirmation. Patience, presence, and sincerity could create a bridge across worlds. And tonight, on Christmas Eve, that bridge had begun to form. The evening deepened, the bistro's warm glow spilling like honey across the polished wood floors. Outside, the snow continued to fall in thick, soft layers, coating the city in a hushed, reflective silence. Lena, still holding Noah in her arms, felt the weight of the day slowly lift. The exhaustion in her bones was still present, but it no longer pressed down with the same intensity. Sitting across from Elliot, she noticed how natural his presence felt, almost like sunlight filling a corner of a room she had long left in shadow. Elliot reached for his cup of tea, warming his hands on the porcelain. He watched Lena and Noah with a quiet curiosity that didn't intrude. There was no judgment in his gaze, only observation, a subtle empathy that pierced the fog of her anxiety and self-doubt. Lena couldn't help but notice the small details, the way he shifted slightly to allow Noah better comfort, the careful avoidance of spilling any tea, the slight crease of concentration in his brow when Noah murmured in his sleep. It was a rare, deliberate attentiveness, almost sacred in its simplicity. "You've been through a lot," Elliot said finally, his voice low but carrying weight. Lena swallowed hard, glancing down at Noah's sleeping face. She had repeated those words to herself countless times, trying to convince herself she was enough, that her exhaustion didn't make her weak. And yet, hearing them from a stranger, someone who clearly commanded the world outside this small restaurant, felt different, real. It wasn't pity, it wasn't condescension, it was recognition. I don't feel like I am, Lena admitted quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Most days, it's just survival. I get up, I feed him, I work, I try to make sure he has everything I can't always give. Elliot leaned slightly closer, his hand resting casually on the table, but his eyes never leaving hers. You're not failing, he said simply. You're doing more than most people would. That counts for something. More than something, really. The words sank in slowly. Lena felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back, forcing a small, shaky smile. It's been hard, she admitted, especially this time of year. Christmas, it used to be different. My mother, she was everything. Elliot's expression softened. There was no rush, no sudden reaction, only a quiet acknowledgement. I understand, he said gently. Loss has a way of shaping the world around us, doesn't it? Making it feel smaller, lonelier. But tonight, you chose to show up anyway. Lena's breath hitched. She had expected judgment, perhaps impatience, maybe even a polite nod and nothing more. But he was different. Every word, every glance carried weight. It carried care. And in that moment, she realized how rare that was. Noah stirred again, tiny arms stretching, his small voice murmuring in sleep. Lena adjusted him, smoothing the blanket across his chest. Elliot reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of fabric, a tiny scarf knit in muted olive tones. For him, he said, handing it to her. Lena stared at the scarf, then at him. You didn't have to, she murmured. I wanted to, he said simply. His voice carried no expectation, no hidden motive, just a gift, quietly offered. Noah's eyes fluttered open slightly, and he reached for the scarf instinctively. Warm, he murmured, nuzzling it against his cheek. Lena's heart swelled, not from the gift itself, but from the way Elliot had noticed, anticipated, and respected her world without overstepping it. The meal continued, slow and deliberate. Soup was sipped carefully, the hot chocolate for Noah providing small comfort. Conversation meandered naturally, from trivial topics to deeper admissions. Lena found herself laughing softly at his quiet humor, the kind that didn't rely on wit or grandeur, but on observation and gentle irony. She told him stories of Noah's mischievous antics, the way he insisted on wearing mismatched socks, the small victories that kept her going. Elliot listened, occasionally interjecting with questions that showed he remembered every detail, that he cared enough to engage meaningfully. At one point, Lena laughed so hard at a story about Noah's attempt to feed the family cat mashed potatoes that tears spilled down her cheeks. Elliot's eyes softened, and for the first time, she noticed him smile fully, warmly, genuinely, without restraint. It was not a practiced smile, not a charm offensive. It was real, and it touched something in her chest she hadn't realized was so cold, so closed off. You're remarkable, he said softly, almost as if the words were more for himself than for her. Not just for surviving, but for finding joy, for still caring so deeply. Lena blanked, struggling to find words. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Then don't say anything, Elliot replied. Just keep being here. The restaurant around them seemed to fade. The chatter, the clinking cutlery, the background jazz, they all became a soft, indistinct hum. In the center of it all was this small table, this quiet corner, and a fragile connection being built, brick by brick, word by word. Lena felt the weight of loneliness she had carried for so long begin to lift, just slightly, as if the space between them allowed room for trust to seep in. Then came the subtle twist, a moment that neither could have anticipated. As Lena reached for her purse, her eyes caught a flash of recognition on Elliot's wrist, a small tattoo, partially hidden under his cuff, a simple design of a reindeer. Her breath hitched. She had seen it before, years ago, in a sketch she had drawn for her mother's holiday project. How could this be? Elliot noticed her sudden pause. "What's the matter?" he asked gently. Lena hesitated, unsure if she should voice it. It's just a detail I noticed. It matters if it means something to you, he said, his tone steady, patient. The words, simple as they were, carried a resonance that made her pulse quicken. Her mind raced, connecting dots, imagining possibilities, but she kept silent, allowing the moment to linger. As the meal drew to a close, Elliot suggested a short walk. The snow outside had turned to a soft, glittering carpet, reflecting the streetlights in tiny pools of warmth. Lena hesitated. Noah was still drowsy, but Elliot gently offered to carry him for the first few steps. She accepted, and together they stepped into the crisp night, leaving the bistro behind, but carrying the warmth of their fragile connection with them. The streets were quiet, dusted and white, the city's usual chaos subdued under winter's blanket. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. The occasional car passed slowly, its headlights casting soft beams across the snow. Lena felt a tentative peace settle over her, fragile but undeniable. She glanced at Elliot, noticing the way he moved, careful not to jostle Noah, alert yet unassuming, like a man accustomed to holding worlds in balance without ever seeking recognition. They stopped near a small park, where the snow had piled in gentle drifts along benches and pathways. Elliot placed Noah carefully on Lena's hip, adjusting the blanket so the boy's face was warm and protected. "He's very brave," Elliot said softly, crouching slightly so he could meet Lena's eyes. "I don't feel brave," Lena admitted, voice low. "But doing what you must with heart is bravery," he said gently. His words were not grand, but deliberate, imbued with quiet conviction. Lena's chest tightened, her throat thick with emotion. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel seen, not just observed, but truly seen. Noah stirred, tiny fingers curling around her hair, and Lena laughed softly, brushing his cheek. "He has no idea how much he teaches me," she said, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Elliot nodded, eyes lingering on both of them. "And you, in turn, teach him courage, and hope, and love." The snow began to fall heavier, the flakes twisting and spiraling in the light. Lena's heart swelled, not from romance, but from the quiet wonder of connection, the slow, deliberate weaving of trust between two people whose worlds had seemed impossibly distant moments before. Then came the unspoken invitation, the subtle tension of possibility. Elliot knelt briefly in the snow, offering her his hand, not in ceremony, not in expectation, but in acknowledgement of the shared moment. Lena's pulse quickened, not from grand gestures, but from recognition of care, sincerity, and presence. She took his hand, allowing the warmth of connection to anchor her in the moment. And for a fleeting instant, the world outside, its noise, its rush, its burdens, fell away. All that remained was this fragile, tentative, extraordinary trust forming between a woman, her child, and a man who had waited, who had observed, who had chosen presence over impatience, sincerity over spectacle. That night, as they returned to their separate worlds, Lena felt a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. And Elliot, watching her from a distance as she held her child close, felt a quiet satisfaction that some moments, unexpected, imperfect, human, could resonate more deeply than any grand plan, any calculated move, any display of wealth or power. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in quiet, and somewhere between exhaustion and wonder, between uncertainty and trust, something extraordinary began to take root. The week after that quiet Christmas Eve passed in a blur of routine for Lena. Between late shifts at the retail store, dinner, and caring for Noah, her days were a relentless cycle of tasks. Yet, beneath the fatigue, a new feeling had begun to stir, a cautious hope. It wasn't just about her own emotions, it was about the sense that the world, sometimes, might respond to her honesty, her effort, and her resilience. And for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, it seemed tied to Elliot. It started subtly. Monday morning, as she unlocked the front door of her modest apartment, a small package sat tucked neatly to the side. The wrapping was simple, brown paper tied with twine, but inside she found a set of children's books. Noah's eyes lit up as she handed him The Littlest Snowflake and Santa's Secret Helper, two books she had been meaning to buy for weeks, but had postponed to cover rent and bills. Who? She asked, glancing around her quiet building. No, she said, clutching the books. Lena smiled faintly, hiding a lump in her throat. Somehow, she knew it wasn't Santa. Somehow, she knew it was him. Over the next few days, small, thoughtful gestures continued. A bouquet of seasonal flowers on her doorstep, a carefully folded scarf for Noah, knit in muted winter tones, a card that simply read, "Your courage is remarkable." No signature, no grand gesture, no expectation, just kindness. Lena found herself reflecting on these actions with a mix of gratitude, confusion, and resistance. Part of her bristled at the thought of being helped, of having someone intervene in her life. She was used to managing everything, carrying the weight of the world without asking for support. But another part, one she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, felt deeply seen, recognized in a way that didn't diminish her independence. Meanwhile, Elliot's own world was quietly transforming. He was still the CEO of a global enterprise, managing board meetings, investor calls, and charitable initiatives. Yet the image he projected, the carefully polished, efficient businessman, was giving way to something softer, more authentic. He found himself planning not grand gestures for public acclaim, but small, deliberate acts that could create genuine impact in the lives of those around him. That Friday, Lena received an envelope addressed in crisp, neat handwriting. Inside was a voucher for a local winter coat store, enough to outfit Noah and herself with warm winter clothing, plus a handwritten note, for the days when cold feels heavier than it should. Her first instinct was to resist, to shove the envelope into a drawer. But Noah tugged at her hand. "Hey?" he asked, eyes wide with excitement. Lena felt her resolve falter. The thought of warm layers shielding them from the harsh winter wind, the possibility of seeing her son's eyes light up, it was irresistible. At the store, she noticed the care with which the vouchers were prepared. Each coat, each scarf, each glove carefully selected for warmth, comfort, and practicality. It wasn't just generosity, it was thoughtfulness, a consideration of their lives, their routines, and their dignity. Lena left the store that afternoon with Noah bundled in layers, the winter sun reflecting off the snow like tiny diamonds. She had never felt so prepared, so protected from the cold, not just physically, but emotionally. Then came the invitation that would change everything. A local community center, a place that offered support and resources to struggling families, had a volunteer event scheduled for that weekend. Lena had attended in the past, helping in small ways when her schedule allowed. But this time, the invitation was different. It was addressed to her personally. The note read, "We would love your presence at the annual winter giving event. Your insight, care, and energy would be invaluable." Lena stared at the envelope for a long time. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. The formal tone, the respect, and the anonymity. It was Elliot, she realized, carefully orchestrating an opportunity for her to see how her kindness could ripple outward. At the community center, the hall was alive with energy. Volunteers moved swiftly, children ran past in bright winter coats, and tables were laden with donations, gifts, and crafts. Lena found herself caught between fatigue and exhilaration. She felt nervous, exposed even, but as she scanned the room, her eyes found him. Elliot, dressed simply in a gray sweater and jeans, sleeves rolled, hair slightly wind-tossed from the walk. No suit, no CEO persona, just a man moving quietly, efficiently, helping where he could. Children surrounded him, tugging at his hands, laughing when he stooped to their level, adjusting ornaments on a small winter tree with careful precision. Noah's face lit up instantly. "Mama!" he exclaimed, bounding forward. Lena laughed softly, her heart swelling. The sight of Elliot engaging so naturally with children, so present in the moment, disrupted the image she had constructed of him. He wasn't untouchable, untethered by human connection. He was grounded, accessible, capable of warmth and kindness that transcended the titles and wealth he carried outside these walls. Lena approached slowly, keeping her voice low. "Elliot," she said, unsure of how to bridge the gap between her gratitude, her awe, and the natural tension that had accompanied every encounter with him. He looked up, eyes meeting hers with the same steady calm that had defined their Christmas Eve encounter. "Lena," he said simply, a small smile tugging at his lips. The day unfolded in a rhythm of quiet collaboration. Lena helped children with crafts, organized gift bags, and offered guidance to volunteers. Elliot worked alongside her, not as a CEO directing an operation, but as a partner in action, lifting boxes, arranging materials, and stepping back when appropriate to allow Lena space to lead. Throughout the afternoon, Lena noticed subtle gestures. Elliot remembering Noah's favorite colors, quietly reinforcing lessons she taught him, offering small acts of kindness without drawing attention. It was the cumulative effect of these moments, small as they were, that began to reshape her perception of him. He was not a distant savior, not a man whose power overwhelmed her life. He was someone who saw the humanity in others and acted about it. A particularly poignant moment occurred near the back of the hall, where a young boy had become frustrated trying to assemble a small wooden toy. He was on the verge of tears, the craft slipping from his grasp. Elliot knelt beside him, speaking softly, offering guidance without taking over. Lena watched from a few feet away, struck by the patience, the subtle teaching, the encouragement that required no grand words or recognition. "That's the thing about kindness," Elliot said quietly, glancing at her without drawing attention. "It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's quiet, deliberate, unnoticed by everyone but the person receiving it." Lena's eyes filled with tears again, not from sadness, but from the realization that this man had transformed her understanding of generosity, care, and human connection. It wasn't just about wealth or gifts, it was about presence, attention, and empathy. As the event concluded, volunteers gathering for final photos and farewells, Lena felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She knelt to adjust Noah's scarf, noticing his small face glowing with excitement. He tugged gently at her hand. Lena smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Yes," she said softly. Elliot approached, standing quietly beside her. "You did wonderfully today," he said, voice low but sincere. "Not just here, but in the way you've balanced everything. Your son, your life, your challenges." The weight of his words settled gently over her. It wasn't flattery, it wasn't charm, it was recognition, thoughtful, deliberate, and grounded in truth. She nodded, swallowing hard, unable to articulate fully the gratitude, awe, and growing connection she felt. Before leaving, Elliot handed her a small envelope, no words written outside the printed card inside. It contained a modest donation to a scholarship fund Lena had mentioned wanting to create for single mothers pursuing education and creative endeavors. "Keep building," the card read. "Your efforts matter." Lena stared at the card long after returning home, Noah asleep in his crib. She placed it gently on the mantel, a quiet symbol of a connection that was no longer about expectation or obligation, but about shared humanity, mutual respect, and the slow, deliberate building of trust. That night, as she lay awake listening to the soft whir of the heater and Noah's even breathing, Lena reflected on the transformation unfolding in her life. She had begun the evening feeling cautious, exhausted, and skeptical of kindness. By the end, she felt inspired, supported, and seen. And while romance had not yet fully entered the picture, the foundation had been laid. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through consistent, thoughtful action that respected her life, her agency, and her world. Somewhere between exhaustion and wonder, between skepticism and hope, Lena realized a truth she had long avoided: that love, kindness, and trust could arrive quietly, in small acts, repeated consistently over time. And when it did, it had the power to reshape not only one day, but an entire life. The snow outside settled into a thick, glittering layer. The city hushed beneath its silent blanket. Lena and Noah curled together on the couch, warm blankets shielding them from the chill. Hearts softened, spirits lifted. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Elliot watched, quietly ensuring that the world remained a place where hope, kindness, and genuine connection could thrive.
And in that shared space, unseen but deeply felt, two lives began to intersect in ways that promised not spectacle or drama, but the quiet, transformative power of sustained care, patience, and trust. The days following the winter giving event were quiet yet charged with subtle anticipation. Lena's life, usually measured in routines and survival, now contained threads of possibility she hadn't dared imagine. Every small gift, every act of quiet thoughtfulness from Elliot lingered in her mind. It wasn't just that he had waited for her on Christmas Eve or left kindness in tangible forms. It was the consistency, the patience, the respect for her world without trying to dominate it. Noah noticed it too. He asked one chilly morning, his small hand holding hers tightly. Lena laughed softly, a sound tinged with exhaustion and amusement. "Soon, sweetheart," she replied, hiding the flutter in her chest. The truth was, she wanted to see him too, but she was careful. She had been burned before by expectation and disappointment, and the last year had taught her that patience, not haste, often revealed the deepest truths. Then came the invitation that would define the next stage of their journey. It was a crisp, white envelope, handwritten with care. Inside, a simple note. "Lena, you've built a light that shines for so many. I'd be honored if you would allow me to share a small part of it with the world. Join me at the charity gala this weekend." Lena paused as she read the note. Gala. She imagined herself, in her simple dress and winter coat, standing amidst polished socialites and philanthropists. Anxiety crept in. She wasn't sure she belonged in that world, even in the shadows. But the way the note was phrased, with respect rather than expectation, made her heart soften.
She could choose to go or choose to decline, and both were equally valid. The evening of the gala arrived. Lena dressed in a modest yet elegant gown, her hair loosely pinned, subtle makeup highlighting her natural features. Noah, wrapped in a warm coat and scarf, waved as she left, the excitement in his eyes mingling with pride. Lena herself felt a mix of nervousness and determination. She would attend not for spectacle, not for approval, but because she wanted to honor the trust and connection that had begun quietly months ago. Elliot was already there, mingling effortlessly but unobtrusively. He noticed Lena immediately as she entered, standing tall in her understated elegance. For a moment, he simply watched, seeing her not through the lens of wealth or status, but through the eyes that had first met him on that snowy Christmas Eve. He had waited patiently for her presence tonight, not as a demand, but as a gesture of trust. Their first moments together were quiet, almost imperceptible. Elliot approached her gently, extending his hand. "Lena," he said softly, his eyes steady. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted. He nodded. "And I wanted you to see it, without any expectations." The evening unfolded like a tapestry of subtle revelations. Elliot introduced Lena to organizers, volunteers, and beneficiaries, but always in a way that highlighted her contributions rather than overshadowed them. Each introduction, each conversation, subtly reinforced the message. She was valued, not for who she might become in his world, but for who she already was. Throughout the night, small interactions between them carried more weight than any grand gesture. A quiet exchange of smiles as a child ran past. A subtle nod when a colleague mispronounced her name. The way Elliot instinctively ensured Noah was comfortable and included in the evening's small activities. It was intimacy without spectacle, connection without demand. A slow, deliberate build of trust that resonated far deeper than any dramatic declaration. As the gala neared its end, Elliot invited Lena to the balcony overlooking the city. Snow had begun to fall again, coating the streets in quiet luminescence. The city lights shimmered through the veil of snowflakes, creating a surreal, almost magical backdrop. Lena wrapped her coat tighter, but she didn't shiver. The warmth she felt wasn't just physical. It was the culmination of months of patient, unspoken trust, of kindness and sincerity that had reshaped her understanding of love and connection. "I wanted to show you this," Elliot said, gesturing toward the city below. "This city, these lights, it's easy to get lost in the chaos, the noise, the expectations. But moments like this, small, quiet, unassuming, They remind us of what really matters. Lima looked at him, taking in the steady calm in his eyes. "You've changed the way I see the world," she said softly. "Not because of anything you've said, but because of what you've shown." Elliot's lips curved into a faint, serene smile. "I never wanted to overwhelm you. I just wanted you to see that someone can be present without taking over, that support doesn't diminish independence." For the first time, Lena allowed herself to fully breathe, to release the guardedness she had carried for so long. She realized that the fear of being overpowered, of being reduced to a role in someone else's life, was dissolving. Here was someone who saw her as an equal, whose presence complemented rather than threatened her world. Noah, noticing their quiet interaction, tugged at her sleeve. Lena laughed softly, a gentle, melodic sound that seemed to harmonize with the night. Elliot crouched to meet Noah's eyes, his smile warm and genuine. "I'd love to hear about it," he said. The conversation that followed was light, playful, and sincere, a testament to the growing comfort and connection between them. Elliot listened attentively as Noah described the intricate plans for his snow fort, asking questions that encouraged imagination and confidence. Lena watched them interact, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude, relief, and a quiet, cautious hope. Later that evening, as the gala drew to a close, Elliot and Lena found themselves walking toward the exit, the soft crunch of snow beneath their feet punctuating the quiet. He extended his hand, and she placed hers within it, not as a symbol of obligation, but as an acknowledgement of trust, respect, and shared experience. Outside, the city was hushed under the falling snow. The streets glistened, the lights reflecting off icy pavements, creating an almost ethereal ambiance. Elliot turned to Lena, his expression serious yet tender. "I know our journey hasn't been conventional," he said. "It hasn't been about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's been about presence, patience, and sincerity." Lena's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of understanding and hope. "You've already shown me so much," she whispered, "more than I ever thought possible. And yes." Elliot nodded, a quiet, profound relief passing through his features. He didn't pull her into a dramatic embrace. He didn't make promises beyond the truth he could offer: presence, respect, and unwavering attention. Instead, he walked beside her, step for step, each movement reinforcing the unspoken bond that had grown quietly, organically, over weeks of thoughtfulness, patience, and shared humanity. The next months were a gradual unfolding of connection and mutual growth. Lena continued her work, her routines, and her responsibilities, but now with a quiet awareness that she was supported, not rescued. Elliot, balancing his professional and philanthropic responsibilities, found purpose in the small, deliberate acts that bridged their worlds. Together, they navigated the challenges of life, work, and parenthood, not as savior and saved, but as partners and equals. Noah flourished in this environment of stability, kindness, and attention. He grew to trust that both adults in his life could coexist harmoniously, each bringing unique strengths and warmth. He laughed more freely, dreamed more boldly, and engaged with the world with a newfound confidence. A year after that first Christmas Eve, Lena opened the doors to her small studio, Lena's Start, a community space dedicated to teaching skills, providing resources, and empowering single mothers. Volunteers, including Elliot, helped prepare the space, arrange supplies, and welcome the first attendees. Lena watched as mothers, children, and volunteers moved through the space, smiles and laughter filling the air. Elliot approached quietly, carrying a tray of hot cocoa. "It looks amazing," he said softly, nodding at the bustling room. Lena smiled, warmth in her eyes. "It does, doesn't it?" He offered her a small, reassuring nod. "You built more than just this space. You built hope." As the day progressed, Lena felt the culmination of months of struggle, perseverance, and quiet miracles. The small acts of kindness, the unwavering patience, and the simple, honest presence of Elliot had transformed not only her understanding of love and trust, but also the lives of those around her. That evening, as snow fell once more over the city, Lena, Noah, and Elliot stood together at the threshold of the studio.
The city lights glimmered, reflecting the soft glow of hope, connection, and new beginnings. No grand proclamations were needed, no spectacle demanded. In the quiet, intimate understanding between them, the story of patience, trust, and heartfelt generosity had reached its most profound conclusion. Lena looked at Elliot, her eyes filled with gratitude and quiet joy. "Sometimes love waits," she said softly. He smiled, taking her hand. "And when it comes, it doesn't need to announce itself." Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Yes," Lena whispered, tears of joy slipping down her cheeks. Under the blanket of fresh snow, with hearts warmed and lives intertwined, they stepped forward, no longer defined by fear, expectation, or absence, but by the quiet, steadfast power of love, patience, and presence. And as the city hummed around them, a story that began with a blind date on a snowy Christmas Eve had blossomed into a narrative of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary impact of ordinary hearts.